Hey, welcome to Coming to Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and my guest today is Kala Barcus. Kala is one of the most generous and hospitable people I know. And along with her husband, Adam, they kind of set the bar for what it means to live a life with open hands and generosity. And so I've invited her today to talk us through how you get to that place in life where you can trust the Lord with what He's given you and you can give it away freely. And so I think you're going to find a ton of practical wisdom here. I think you're also going to find incredible ways for you to ramp up your own life of generosity, including special for parents. If you have kids and you're wondering, how do I begin to give them these gifts of trust in the Lord, obedience in our giving of time, talent, and treasure? I think she has some great advice for how to get that started today to build generational generosity in the future. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's conversation. Welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and I'm joined today by Kala Barcus. And Kala is a member here at Covenant Church and somebody who I've wanted to have on for a while. And I'm specifically super interested in part of her upbringing, the way she lives her life now, and maybe the wisdom she has to offer for us as it relates to living generously. And so it's sort of a strange topic because it doesn't have a specific, practical, obvious, bulleted list of do this differently. But I think as you hear her, you're going to experience what I've experienced, which is the inspiration to move my life in a more generous direction. So Kala, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are thrilled to have you. And I guess the best place to start is why are you the way that you are? How did you get to be who you are? Where did this generous living spirit show up in your life? What has contributed to make you who you are in the way that you approach life and generosity?
I would say it started as a kid. I was raised in a very generous home. My parents were generous with everything we had. We There was always people staying at our house, like we had hospitality. We had tithing as a part of our upbringing. My parents both had a saying where they would always say, "It's God's car, it's God's house," and just kind of giving this overall, like, none of this stuff is ours. It's like we're stewarding it and we're taking care of it, but it's God's. And so even if we would mess up big and something would break or something would happen, they would say, "It's God's." And not in a careless way, but in a surrendering way, where it just kind of put kingship in our home for God, that all this stuff was His, whether it was our bedroom, our car, our house, anything that was ours was actually not ours, and it was God's. And so we had a way of both welcoming people in. My parents were always feeding the masses, both like in fun things and in serving things. And so it kept us flexible too. Like if people were coming to visit, we were bumped out of our rooms and it was no longer our room, and that was fine. And it just had a rhythm way of becoming normal for us.
Was it ever
And so,
a bummer? Like as a kid, were you ever kind of like even mildly resentful of being like, I want my room back or I want my bed? Do you have any of those types of stories where in the moment it didn't always feel like the thing you wanted to be doing with your life?
yeah, actually, I remember there was one Christmas. We had a family living with us. They were a young couple and a little kid, and we had to do our tree differently because they were afraid that the little kid was going to like destroy this Christmas tree. So I remember being like, why does our Christmas tree have to change? Because this kid's going to climb it. Just
How
being really
funny.
frustrated. But they were around and we changed it and it was fine. Like it was
Hmm.
a good life lesson because in the grand scheme of things, like I'm sure I don't even know the family story. That was another thing. Is like we didn't always know the stories. We just knew that we were blessing them. So we
Hmm.
knew what we needed to know as kids, which wasn't everything, but we just knew that we were loving them and sharing our space with them.
What did it look like specifically for you guys with as children? So when you say we were tithing, if you got $10 for doing some job around the house or grandma gave you money, was it were you commanded and laid it out on the table and you took $1 out and gave it to the church, or how did they give you guys that sense of that?
Yeah, it was structural. Like when we got birthday money, when we got something, we did a tithe, save, spend every time. And it was just something we did as kids. I don't remember questioning it a lot. Like if we got it was the same percentage every time. and tithing was 10%, and that's what we did. And so we always gave that to the church. And then I can't remember the exact split for save and spend, but it was the same. And so it was expected. We knew it. And almost visually in our head, we knew that 10% of whatever we got wasn't ours anyway, because we were
Hmm.
going to tithe it. So I remember then when I got my first paycheck, that was when my dad helped me set up the structure of tithing regularly. It was, he just said we tithe 10%, period. And that wasn't in a like dictatorship kind of way. It was just foundation. It
Hmm.
was because Jesus commanded it, and that's how we built our framework. And so it took the questioning out of it. It wasn't up to feelings. It wasn't up to how the month went. It wasn't up to like things I wanted to buy. It was just where we started. And I think that's why the Bible talks about first fruits, because when you do it first, there's no question later. And
Hmm.
so I think this rhythm just started, and I never looked back because I knew that if there was ever an option to change it, I would. And so it needed to be this foundational, structural way. That way, no matter if I was making $100 or $1,000 or whatever I was making, it was still the same structure. Structure wasn't up for debate because it was out of obedience to just this framework that we built in. And then it became easier because then you visually already you look at the piece of the pie with 10% gone, and that's just how you look at it. It's not a should I give, can I give, how about this month, what about next? It's just done. And that way it was easier because it took the questioning.
Yeah, you don't have to feel like doing it that day.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
you overrode feelings with the structure in place. What was your, just out of curiosity, what was the first job? So where did this first paycheck come from?
I was a waitress it was a restaurant called Ben's Table that's no longer around.
Okay.
So I was a waitress there and did not make much money. So it's not like it was easy to give when you don't make much. No matter what you make, it's not easier to give because if you
Yeah.
make a little, then you don't have much, and if you make a lot, then the 10% gets bigger. Like
Hmm.
it wasn't easier because I made less money. It
Yeah.
was just yeah,
Huh. No, that's totally true. I hear that from people who go, well, on both sides of the spectrum, people who don't make much say, well, I'd give, but I don't have much to live on. And it's not like it would change
yeah,
anybody else's life for me to give my $11. And on the other end,
yes,
people go, well, I make a lot of money. And so how is it fair that I
yeah,
have to give $40,000? And you go, well, if we
yeah,
all follow the biblical principle, it somehow all
hmm
works out. Maybe it's more for us than for God, as if God maybe doesn't need our dollars as much as He wants our hearts. But I'm jumping ahead. So tell me
yeah.
then. So you're done with Ben's Table. You're in your adult life. Um, what does it look like in your adult life to live with this kind of generosity? And that's a weird question, maybe because it's like, tell us how great you are. It's more like what does it look like in your home now? What reflections or kind of a mirroring of your childhood do you have in your own home when it comes to hospitality or the way you, Adam, or your kids deal with stuff or money or even relationships?
Yeah, it just generosity keeps you flexible. Our kids, similar to me, they're used to having people over for dinner, whether it's like a formal invite or neighbors who just happen to be around. That helps them easily share their food, their table, their space, their stuff, our attention. Even they're used to just sharing these things, and it's just become a rhythm of life for us. Like we feel incredibly blessed by what we have, and it just overflows into wanting to bless other people. And not always because it's easy. Like we've hosted a neighborhood party, we hosted a big wedding reception, and again, I don't say that to brag because it was so much work, but it was also like we want to invite people into our space to show them Jesus. And it's watching those ripple effects. It feels I think we just feel honored to be a part of it. And we shift the script a little and look at what it's doing. Like generosity just has a ripple effect. It does. And so when you're dealt with generously, you become generous with others. And it's so fun to see that ripple effect. And so I think that we've just felt really privileged to be able to give. And not because we give out of abundance, but we give out of obedience. And then that obedience has also blessings that are attached with it. Um, like I love the Proverbs verse that talks about a generous man will prosper, and he who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. I think
Hmm.
people get stuck on the first part of the letting go and the giving, but they don't leave space to anticipate what then comes to them. And not in a payback kind of way, like I give you something, you give me, not like a quid pro quo, but in a way that like when we refresh others, we're refreshed too. And we are dealt with generously from the Lord. And it just keeps cycling back through. And if you don't enter into that cycle, you just miss out on it. And so
Mm.
I think that that's just been a really sweet way of just doing life both for our kids. And then we watched them become generous with their friends. And, they had a fun day at school the other day where Ruthie was giving away some of the prizes she won to other kids that didn't have prizes. And it wasn't a big deal. It was just like, well, they didn't have any and I had more. So I gave some to them. And it's just sweet to see that become reflective because when you're taught that as kids, you just live open handedly versus with this mind mentality. Because I think that it's easier when you're little to let go of stuff. It's harder when you're an adult. So to teach kids to live with this open handed mentality, they just look at the world a little differently.
Do you I mean, I guess the question is that how you do it? Like the zooming out and knowing that there's impacts beyond the moment? Because I know you guys a little bit, and we track together as friends, and I
Mm-hmm,
know that there are times when your life is all kinds of chaos and all kinds of burdens and all kinds of trials you're walking through, and yet you're still hosting people, or you're still having the wedding reception, or you're still living generously. How do you? Because I think everybody listening, everybody watching, would have this sense of like, how do I do that though? When life is busy and life is overwhelming and I have too much on my plate anyway, how do I continue to live this? And I think hospitality is a good proxy for generosity. It's hospitality of
mm-hmm,
time and space. But how do I continue to live with hospitality and generosity when I feel like I have nothing left to give? So how do you do
mm-hmm,
that? How do you work through that? Because I've seen it in you in a healthy way,
mm-hmm.
where you're not over the line burning yourself out. You're going, this is who we are. But so how do you do
Mm-hmm.
it?
I think that for us, generosity is trust at its core. It's trusting in the Lord. Um, it's 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 a lack of trust is believing only what you can see, and we believe in the unseen. Um, when we lack generosity, it's kind of like refusing to pass around the basket of bread and fish because you believe that's all there is. But when you have this trust in the Lord, you go from like what you believe you have to give, and it becomes kingdom math. Like when you're trying to make the math work in terms of time, money, when you can only see with our limited vision, then we don't trust that the Lord will show up. But when you tap into kingdom math, you believe there's always more
Mm,
because it's not up to me to provide for the masses, it's up to the Lord. So I don't walk into it thinking like I'm feeling really good and I have so much, like you said, I've had chaotic seasons. It's not like, man, I have so much time and money right now. I should just give them away. It's
yeah.
not like we come from a spot where we have so much overflow, but it's that kingdom math of the multiplication effect that we're like, I think that we just trust the Lord to show up.
Mm,
If we open our doors, open our homes, open our table, if we bless someone with something financially, like the kingdom math is going to come in and it's going to make things work because we don't actually think we're giving out of our own supply anyway. So I think it's scary to look at
um,
what you have and be like, okay, this isn't going to work. Like, cause it's not like it's not. So when we're giving out of what we have, there's not a lot to give. When we're
right.
giving out of what the Lord has, like more shows up. Like it actually does. And it's scary to live in a way where you just trust that it's going to be filled up when you're emptying it out. But it's, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because I mean, so it goes back to the ownership piece of
Yeah.
who owns it. And if I don't own it, I
Yes.
don't have to be afraid about giving it. And if
Yes.
I don't feel
Yes.
like giving it, I can still give it because it's not mine
Yes.
anyway.
Yes.
Um, what's on the dangerous side of this when it comes to is there a warning of, I want to almost call it performative generosity? Is there a warning where this becomes where my generosity becomes about me and not about God? Is there a time, I mean, like I said, you guys have hosted things when you're almost on empty yourselves, and there's a danger that um, if you are on empty and you're still pouring out, maybe the Lord has a season for you to recoup or reset. Is there a warning or a danger for somebody who's trying to take what you're saying about living generously but it's not about trust, is it? Or if it's not about obedience, it's about performance, so that God would love me more, and I'll show Him that I'm
Mm,
trying this. Have you ever
hmm
witnessed that, seen that, been in that season where you find yourself needing to take a step back from hospitality, generosity, and that? Um, does that question make any sense?
It does make sense. I I don't know that I've seen people give to their detriment as much. I
Yeah,
feel like if I'm going to be in one ditch, I think I'd rather be in the ditch of over generosity, over hospitality. Um, I think people are so afraid of that they can steer away from generosity and hospitality in general.
yeah,
Even financially, like, I don't know, we're coming up to a tough season, we got to pull back a little. And I think that we probably dive in more with trust, um, in what the Lord will do, regardless of our season, than to pull back out of like caution and reservation. I think the people that have impacted me the most have just lived lives that have like reckless abandon in
hmm,
terms of like their giving, their hosting. Like I read something that talked about, it was years ago, someone said something like, host before you're ready or you'll never be ready. And
yeah,
I liked that concept because it was like, yeah, I could wait until our house is just right, or things are just so, or we're in this good season. And sure, there's times to just say no to things. And there's times where your family needs your time and attention. And I totally think that. But I think when this overall mentality of generosity comes in, there's less seasons like that because the Lord provides in the margin.
hmm,
I think because we're trusting that He will. And so, like, we've hosted before when our cabinets had no doors on them. Like, I was so embarrassed. I was like, our kitchen's a disaster, but we have this thing going on. So we're just going to welcome these people in. And do I look great right now? No. Does my house look great? No. But are these people being blessed? I hope so. We had like 20 kids in our old house didn't have a basement, and we would host regular events with so many kids, and it was not ideal at all. But it was just, we did things in this not ideal season, knowing that like the Lord will still show up and maybe someday it'll feel different. But if we pause and wait till things are just right or things are just so, we just won't get there. It
hmm.
just will have this rigidity to us that will just say like, not now, not yet. I think that I would rather see a whole bunch of people figuring out how to live like how to rein it in because they've been too generous than like I think I see way more of the opposite of like
Yeah,
over caution because they're just afraid that it's not the right time, it's not the right season, I don't have enough, I don't have this thing this other person has, it doesn't look like them. So it's not right for us. I feel like I'd rather see people being like, I'd rather see them in the ditch of like, wow, we gave too much, what now? I
yeah.
don't know.
No, that's great, and
Does
I
that
think
make sense?
that's super helpful. Because I do think it's a common hurdle for people to go. When is
Yeah.
it too much? When do I pull back? How do I work this out? And if your lifestyle, kind of what you said, if your mindset is that, one, I don't own it, and two, I've been given it to give, um,
hmm
God will provide some natural barriers and roadblocks along the
Yes.
way, and there will be space
Yep.
for that. But if we trust Him with all things, including finances and other things, usually it works out pretty well. How does it change,
Yep.
to shift gears ever so slightly? How does giving and giving to the church specifically, because you guys are faithful givers, not only with your resources but your time, you volunteer, your husband's an elder. How does that change your relationship to church, like your local church? Because um, I have a hunch that there's a greater level of ownership. You kind of care more than most people,
Mhm.
about what's happening, and you're more in tune with it. Do you think that is related to your giving? Do you think there's a correlation between personal ownership in my local church and giving in my local church? Does that seem to be tied in together?
Yep. It definitely is. Um, I read a quote recently too that said everything you do is an investment. You're always pouring your time, talent, and treasure into something, and wherever you're pouring it, that's where your heart is. So wherever we're putting our money, whether it's Chipotle or a tithe, like that's all part of the big thing, right? And so
Yeah.
for us, our investment is in the church, and so we our first fruits go to the church, and then anything outside of that is over in terms of like we have this month was really great. Let's bless these people. Or we actually feel a need. Let's do this. And so those are the bonus things, but the church for us is the foundational. That's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
For us, it's what happens every month. It's not a debate. It's the foundation. And then therefore we care about what's going on there. We love hearing the missions. I love the weeks where we hear about like our mission life updates because we trust that the church is then blessing other missions as well. So yeah, it gives us a trust in the church. It gives us an investment in the mission, and not in a way where like I deeply care how the church spends every dollar, but in a like I'm proud to be a part of this because that's where we financially invested and they're doing good, healthy things. And so I think if your attendance and your investment aren't in the same spot, then something's probably off.
That's really good.
Whether
So
it's
let me say that again. If your attendance and your investment are not in the same spot, we would call that disintegrated or incongruent living. I
Yes,
attend
because
one
there's a
place,
lack
but my
of
money goes
trust
another
somewhere.
place.
Yep,
Yes.
there's a lack of trust because you're either not trusting that the church is doing the right thing with your money, which again, then we're actually back to the beginning where it's not your money anyway. So you're either trusting the church isn't using your money or you don't trust the mission at large. And
Hmm.
so I don't actually want, like, even the financial meetings, I'm not deeply concerned with every line item because that's not, I don't think that's my business. I think that there's people in place to help manage those things. Like, I don't think the whole church should be a financial committee. I think
Yeah.
the church hires wise people to manage the dollars and cents. I care that the overall organization is healthy, that they're financially not in debt, and that they are continuing to give. And once those like bullet points are done, I step back out of the details.
Hmm.
So I think that if we care too much about the minutia, we get invested like we're like a business partner, and we're not a business partner. We're just giving as obedience to the Lord. Like it's not like we're on the board of decision making. We actually
Yeah.
have a board for decision making, and I trust those people. And I think sometimes when we can't trust those people, we haven't actually let go of the money. We still feel like that money is a little bit ours. And so then we want to know what's happening with it versus being like, it's not mine, it's God's. I gave it to God and I trust that this organization is going to manage that.
That's great. That's great. And that mirrors a lot of people. Um, Sort of parallels if you see someone on the side of the road that's panhandling and in need, and the question everyone asks is, "But what will they do with it?" Um,
Hmm.
and and we all know the feeling of going, "But I feel compelled to give." And if it buys something that I'd rather they not buy, I suppose that's on them, not on me.
Right, right.
And hopefully the church doesn't feel like it's panhandling, but no, that's really helpful and I think really instructive for people to kind of consider, especially the investment side, where your money goes is really where your heart is going.
Yeah,
And so if I spend more money at Starbucks in a month than I do on my local church, then I'm actually really about the mission of Starbucks, or my own
right,
caffeine addiction,
right,
than I am about.
right,
And
right,
that's helpful. And so just for
right.
clarity's sake, because people are hearing you going like, well, do they live in a shack and not drive cars? Have they ever been on a vacation? The beautiful thing about you guys is you do go on vacation. You do have reliable transportation. You do live in a nice house. And so
Hmm.
they're not mutually exclusive. And we make
Right,
giving black and white.
right.
And so I would just want to say that out loud so you don't have to. You guys live a wonderful life. And your kids are taken care of. And your generosity is not exclusive of your own provision that God has for you. It's
Sure.
almost as if, and like we said, you don't give to get, but it's almost like God sees your obedience and makes sure that you're in a place where you can continue to give by giving to you.
Yeah,
And there's something really beautiful about that.
yeah,
Considering your kids then, so we have parents listening who are going, this is great. I wasn't taught this. I wasn't raised like this, but maybe I can be the start of this generationally.
hmm,
How would you advise parents to start this with their kids? How can people begin to pass on generosity to their kids? Do you have tips and tricks or things you do with your kids that you got from your parents? What would I do if I'm a
yeah,
parent going, I want to start this generationally, but I don't even know where to start. So what do you got for us?
yeah. I think as a kid, and actually even as adult, a lot of generosity is just discipline, which that it feels like it should be emotional, but it's discipline. Because when you're in the discipline of doing it, just like building healthy habits, just like we teach our kids to eat healthy, we teach our kids to get enough sleep. I think that generosity is built in as a foundational habit for children. And so like we have jars, our girls have just simple Amazon jars that have 3 spaces: spend, share, save. Same thing. So the share, spend, share, save. So the share we use as time because it didn't have it. But so we've taught them already, like you get $10 in, we break it up into these jars. And it's helpful. I've read that it's helpful with young kids to do physical money because they just learn by visually seeing. So I know there's a lot of like kid debit cards and way to do those sorts of things, but when they never see the money and if they just electronically give to the church, it doesn't really mean anything for them. So for us, it's like when they get the point where they have $10 to tithe, we put it in an envelope with their name. They take it to church. They put it in the box because it physically helps them see that their money is going versus like, oh, just give it to me and I'll put it online. Like that's great in terms of like the money gets there, but they don't really feel the like giving of it.
Right.
So I think it's a healthy discipline. It's discipline like any other discipline you teach them. And I think that it's never too late. And we don't have a lot of money yet for the kids. Like they don't make an allowance. Like money is not, they're 7 and 9, so it's not super big in their life right now. That's why I think like we did it little when I was little, and then when I got a job, that's when it's like, hey, we're going to start from the very first with this discipline. So I think it's a discipline of, in terms of money, just starting immediately, starting with the discipline, and I think then it continues to be a foundational piece of how they think and it becomes way less emotional. Because I think anytime generosity is emotional, it's going to ebb and flow. Anytime it's a discipline, it's going to be something that you stick to every time without question.
Have you had a story or an instance where one of your kids was unexpectedly generous, or when you had one of those? We all have those moments where our kids do something that's actually virtuous and redemptive, and we go, "It's working. Something we're doing is working." Do you have any stories like that around this topic with your kids?
I think I've watched them be so quick to want to pass stuff along.
Hmm.
Um, the like our Georgia was going to get a new bike, and so she quickly wanted to give her bike to the neighbor. And there's this concept of giving versus selling, like because I know it's really easy to do Facebook Marketplace, and like that's one thing I feel like I've shied away from with small stuff because I've been given so much. We've gotten clothes, hand-me-downs, we've gotten all these things. So then when my kids are done with something, I think that they routinely are like, who can I give this to? Or where can I pass this along? Versus like, what can I sell this for? Which is really, I think that's really fun that they can look at their stuff as an opportunity to give to somebody else rather than can I make money off this or what else am I going to buy? And I try to do the same with our stuff because then it just becomes something that they look forward to. Like when something like if Georgia puts on a shirt and it's getting a little short, she's like, okay, let's give this in the pile to give to so and so because she's excited to like give it away. And so I think that they just look at all of our stuff as something that can be passed on to bless someone else if we're done with it, if it doesn't fit, or if it just, um, yeah, if they're just excited to pass that along. I don't know if that I
No,
don't
I
know
love
that I
it.
have any like fireworks moments yet in terms of like their generosity. I think
Hmm.
it's just been sweet in the everyday. Like even like my eldest is probably the least likely to just give of herself. Like my middle is very, very generous. She would come home without a backpack one day if someone asked for it. Like, she's very generous. So even hearing this week Ruthie to give something out of her prizes or out of her stuff is like, okay, you're seeing this payoff. You're seeing what it does when a kid who didn't have anything now has something that was yours, and that feeling is so good.
Yeah.
So
No, that's so huge because it is in the little things, and maybe that's the thing we need to get to parents is if you're looking for the highly gratifying moment where your kid does a radical act of generosity that gets front page headlines, you might be waiting a while, but the
yeah,
the reward for the parent or maybe the confirmation evidence that this is working is as their overall mindset towards generosity
hmm
starts to take hold and you see them wanting to
hmm
give things away. And it could
yes,
be something as simple as you sent them with cookies in their lunch and they come home and
yes,
say, can I have a cookie? Because I didn't get one at lunch. I gave it to my friend who was having a bad
yes,
day. And you go, you're getting it.
yes,
You're getting it.
yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's
Because then your
beautiful.
antennas are up. You're in tune to the world around you. You're sensing needs. And it's not just like getting rid of stuff when you're done with it. It's anticipating. It's just kind of having a different lens that you look through of like, how can I bless? And like gift giving is one of my love languages. Like I love it. I love getting gifts, but I love giving gifts. And I think there's just something about that when you start to love giving gifts, you just think like, what else can I give? Or how
Mhm.
can I make this person happy? Or you just kind of uncurl your fists a little bit, whether it's with your time, your money, and you just kind of your antennas are you just start sensing needs around you, and then you realize how gratifying it is to be able to meet the needs that weren't even expressed or bless people in ways they didn't expect. Or yeah, I think that's what I like for them.
Hmm. Yeah, we've even done
So
things where we will like I will pack something. So let's say cookies in a lunchbox. I'll pack extra and say, why don't you figure out who to share these
mm,
with today? So I
hmm
think there's really easy ways to train small children
hmm
as you, in a sense, are playing. You're the God provider in their life to give them that example.
yeah
Is as you give them of extra, um,
hmm
with the instruction to give it away, they begin to get that cycle of gratification, of joy, of
hmm
seeing other people's needs met. That's good. And then maybe for adults who are just getting started on the journey of generosity, maybe it's sort of the same, where
yeah
you may not have it in your budget right now to give
yep
10%, 20%. You may not have that,
yep yep
but what do you have one extra of? And to your point, maybe it's just getting the antenna that can sense the need around you. And that could just be the start of going, oh, I do have the ability to make a meal, or I do have the ability to watch someone's kids and give them a date night. There are
yeah
things I can do that cost me nothing, but that
yeah
begin that's this generous life. And I think that's really brilliant.
yeah yeah oh,
Kayla, this has been packed. I think I'm going to have to go back and listen again to even grab half of the things you've said. I'm still swirling on obedience versus abundance as my reason for giving. I think there's something so powerful in that. Um, but before we go, are there any other thoughts, ideas? Are there things that are swirling in you that as we talk about this, what else would we want to make sure that you get across to people or that we give to the people listening?
I think I think that when I think about generosity, I just think if you're giving from what you have, there's a finite amount. But if you're giving from what the Lord provides, it's infinite. And I think when you start to shift your thinking, both using obedience, sensing the world around you, and having it be foundational to how you live, like your life changes. And it's definitely one of those things where it doesn't change before it changes after you're obedient. And I, I feel like we have been generous with people too, with the very with with very clear intention of like we are generous with you because we want you to be generous with others, and people have done that for us, which has changed how we live, and we want to help you change, and we want to see this kingdom ripple effect. And so I think when everybody kind of buys into this, your culture changes, your community changes, and when everyone is not looking at all their resources as just theirs and protecting what they have, you start to live in a very like open community way. And so I don't think that you have to give out of a place of overabundance. I think you just give out of obedience, whether it's tithe, whether it's hosting, whether it's making a meal. And when you make space for people, the Lord makes even more space for you. And so it's just a really sweet, it's so sweet. And I'm so passionate about it because I've just seen the goodness of God
Hmm.
in in the ways that we have chosen to be sacrificial, because then God's goodness shows up in just the most real, tangible ways. Not just like butterfly feeling that was nice, but like heaven on earth experiences because we're willing to open up to what we have and say, it's not really even ours to begin with. It's all the Lord's. And so then the Lord just brings, he employs kingdom math. He supplies kingdom needs. He just does things that don't make sense that we can't possibly do ourselves. And I just have such a passion for people to see that part of the kingdom
Hmm.
And I just encourage people to start with what's hard, to start with the discipline, and that trusting that the Lord will show up in that. And so I don't know, it's just changed our life. It's changed how we parent. It's changed how we interact with the world around us. And I just want that for everyone, not because I love dinner parties, which I do, but it's like I love this bigger picture of this like heaven on earth experience of just sharing in all that we have and just enjoying the Lord's abundance when we're willing to tap in.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a better way to finish it. If we could have a tenth of your passion for these things and maybe a tenth of your generosity and hospitality, we'd all be on a better trajectory. And so thank you for taking the time and sharing your heart and your wisdom. I'm sure people are not only going to be blessed, but challenged. And that's a really powerful thing, that we have to receive what you've given us and also go, how do I make this real in my own life? So Kayla, thank you for making time for us, for having the conversation, for being willing to share of what God's done in your life. And for you listening or watching along with us, thank you for being part of the conversation. And we will see you again very soon.